I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture.
Welcome to Hard NOC Life. I am Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
I'm Dominic Ma.
And I am Shawn Taylor.
What?
Hi, Shawn Taylor.
What are you doing here, Shawn?
I'm no longer moving and upgraded all my papers.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
He heard there was a really big problem, like Thanos was attacking or something, and decided to show up. Unlike some people.
Or not.
Or not.
Hard NOC Life, assemble. Shawn should have been like, on your left.
That's what DC is saying. Or getting spoken to them by Marvel like every 5 seconds.
That's what we should have done.
Well, this is a very special episode of Hard NOC Life. Stick around after the break. I talked to Lin-Manuel fucking Miranda about In the Heights. But before we get to the interview with myself and Lynn, we gotta talk about the Eternals trailer. Dominic, you've been clamoring for some hot Eternals footage for years, it feels like. We got that little tease in the Marvel Please Come to the Movie Theaters video from a couple weeks ago, but now we had a full-on Chloe Zhao shooting a sunset on the beach, Kevin Feige losing his mind. That you can capture this in camera. I'm never going to stop giving him shit for that.
No,
Sorry,
that's
Britney.
funny. That's a funny anecdote.
So what did we all think of the first 2 minutes of Eternals footage that we got?
Well, I was clamoring, but mainly curious, and I think it looks like a really great Cirque du Soleil show, and I still don't know, and my expectations are tempered by the fact, again, that the Eternals is a niche, not as well-known section of the Marvel Universe. I mean, you folks even have a favorite Eternal? I don't really have a favorite Eternal. I kind of like Cersei, but I don't like live or die by her.
The new Eternals book is absolutely incredible.
Okay.
I don't buy a lot of Marvel books. And the guy at my local was like, yo, Shawn, I think you actually might like this one. And I'm all in.
Right on.
Who's doing the book right now?
I wish I could have known. I read so many books a week. I could probably go look at my stash right now and tell you.
Yeah, I'm reading the Neil Gaiman run from 2000, I think it's 2006, on Marvel Unlimited. So far that's been pretty good. And I think the main character you're following is the one that Kit Harington is playing. I can't remember his name. I've already forgotten it.
The Black Knight?
Yeah, but he's kind of like, it feels like almost the same as like Jon Snow. It's like another mopey, very jury type of dude.
There's going to be a scene where Gemma Chan goes up to him and says, because I think to your point, Brittany, the plot of the movie is going to be closer to the Neil Gaiman book because it's going to be about the Eternals have all forgotten who they are.
Yeah.
And they've lived for centuries and they got to regain their memories. Because one of the questions is, I think, Shawn, you may have posed this question on social media, like, where the fuck have they been for the last 10 years if they've been around?
Yeah.
It's like the same question you asked Wakanda. Transatlantic slave trade? What happened? Where are you? It's Kieran Gillen, who's one of the best comic writers out who's doing it. I'm just know why I can't think of his name right now. But he also did Phonograph, which is the best comic almost ever written. Wonderful writer.
But I think the plot of the film is going to be that. And I hope there's a scene in which Gemma Chan goes up to Kit Harington and says, you are the Black Knight. And he says, I don't want it. I don't want it.
We don't think Kit Harington is in the trailer, is he?
He is, for a little bit.
Did we see him? Oh, I thought that... Okay, sorry. My bad. I thought it was the other guy. Yeah.
No, right. Well, they're brothers in Game of Thrones, so it's easy to get them mixed up.
Dope.
Because that's the thing, too. Black Knight and Cersei are a romantic couple in the comics, but it's clearly they're setting up Cersei and Icarus to be... I don't know. It's almost like Hawkman, Hawkgirl vibes because they're in love in different points in history,
right?
Kind of thing.
But that is with Cersei and Icarus, right? That sort of traveling through time bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where I'm actually meeting Kit Harington's character and Cersei have just somehow bumped into each other at a coffee shop, and now they're talking. So they don't know who they are, that they're all connected. And this is after he's bumped into Icarus, who he thinks Icarus is a madman that they sent to I think the mental institution.
Yeah.
Because they thought he was making all this stuff up that we used to be gods and all this stuff. It's really it's some good stuff so far.
So my question to those of you who are more familiar with the Eternals than I am is the thing about Eternals having amnesia solely the Neil Gaiman take on those characters, or is that part of just the mythology of the Eternals? That's how they can be around.
Type stuff where they can be reincarnated, basically put into new bodies, and so that could probably speak to that a little bit. And I think the Neil Gaiman run maybe touched on it. I know the new run, Gellen's run, is really talking about it because their resurrection machine gets broken. And so that's one of the main plot points. And then Thanos shows up, of course, because that's the ever villain now. But yeah, I think that could partially be, for me, it's just interesting. I'm just this could have been a New Gods film.
Yeah.
Not they're not mirror images of each other, but I think that's part of I think that if they put that, their giant mother box machine doesn't resurrect or somehow is damaged, I can see that being why an amnesia thing would be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of New Gods, though, right? I think if the one criticism, and I thought it was a gorgeous looking trailer.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
With Chloe Zhao doing a fucking superhero movie is you're going to get wide shots of vistas and Gemma Chan looking amazing, but the one criticism I've seen so far is that it doesn't look very Kirby-esque, right? The Eternals just on paper are the Kirby-est Kirby's of all time to Kirby, right?
Mm-hmm. Except again for the New Gods, which could be.
Well,
we should.
Unfortunately, we've seen live action versions of New Gods, and they're also not very Kirby. Well, the Snyder cut, Darkseid and Granny Goodness.
Can we just stop
right?
pretending that was good and stop trying to defend it? Come on, let's just be honest. It's he likes his version of the characters. He doesn't like the characters. Right. He likes his version of them, and it's come on, really? How can you you have over 200 and some odd collective years of history, of visual, audio,
narrative,
comic book history, and you choose to do this?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
You missed all the Snyder Cut talk, Shawn.
Yes, I think I might have intentionally avoided that, maybe.
Well, but about the New Gods, though, right? We were supposed to get an Ava DuVernay Tom King collab that cancel culture is out of control because DC and Warner Brothers canceled the New Gods movie. But I think Dom had made this point several weeks ago. When the news of New Gods cancellation broke, it's another case of Marvel kind of one-upsmanning DC in that they're able to put out the obscure Kirby-esque property, and it's going to turn into $1 billion franchise because it's going to be that movie that everyone's going to, by November, everyone's vaccinated, everyone, theaters are open. It's going to be this release that
and you
everyone's
have to
finally back in the
give
theaters.
Thor Ragnarok the credit, right? Because Thor Ragnarok showed that the Marvel could be weird. And Marvel is at its best when Marvel's at its best when it's weird. Or Walt Simonson, right? It's when Marvel is weird is their best. But I think Marvel has never used an A-list character because Captain America was on the C-list at the time. Iron Man, same thing. And when Jessica Jones came out and Daredevil came on TV, they've always tested the waters with their C, B list characters. And so that gives them, I think, more latitude. Think they made a Blade movie. Marvel didn't make a Blade movie, but New Line made a Blade movie, right. Which, you're welcome, X-Men franchise in Marvel, in our Marvel Cinematic Universe. But there's something about being able to go into your stacks, right, and get some of the most obscure, and being able to present that. DC starting with Superman and JLA was the dumbest idea ever.
It's always been a problem.
Should have started with the question and have the question map out an entire conspiracy that involves all the superheroes.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's really interesting, I think, also because, as you say, Marvel is comfortable with trying this kind of thing. DC isn't going to get New Gods.
And they trust their property. They trust their IP. Whereas Warner Bros. Is you mean that DC over the dumb country over there? We don't want to touch on that. It's why would you not? You have some of the most fascinating stories. Why does their animation get it right, but their cinematic offerings get it so terribly wrong. Except for Shazam and the first Wonder Woman.
Right. Well, and I think there's a case to be made that...
And Harley Quinn.
Whatever you may feel about the CW, like, the CW is successful in that it's 10 years strong. Yeah. It's got all of these various properties. And to your point, Shawn, none of them are A-list. Like Flash, Green Arrow, Black Lightning, Batwoman.
Green Arrow.
Right. Their whole universe is built around Green Arrow.
In the Marvel model.
Legends of Tomorrow was maybe called, the C-list Legends of Tomorrow, right? And it worked because they decided to actually have fun. For some reason, the television shows are allowed to have fun. Besides the murky moodiness of Arrow and Black Lightning, right? They're allowed to have some fun. Like Stargirl is absolutely amazing. And nobody's watching it. Nobody's watching it, but it's really good. But I think what the Eternals are going to do, I think for Marvel, it's going to usher us into the weird phase, right? So we're going to have Doctor Strange. We're going to have the Eternals. I know there's rumors about a Midnight Suns movie. I mean, there's like this next phase is going to be like the weirdness that Marvel does. I think when Marvel does the weird, that's when they're firing on all cylinders.
For sure.
And it just took them 10 years to get that, right? Like the confidence to not have to like ground everything in like the real world
relationship building,
right?
Yeah, they built, like Shawn just said, they were relationship building with their audience, because where they've started to where they're going, it's gonna be crazy and weird and awesome, which I like to see in superhero media. So I'm really looking forward to this next phase and for the true King of the North to take back that crown.
Bend the knee.
One thing I want to mention about that my impression of the Eternals trailer was this is like one of those cases where representation really does matter because of the setup. Like, unlike the Asgardians, the Eternals are like the Asgardians in a lot of ways, except the Asgardians inspired, worship, god myth in just, one sector of the world. Supposedly, the Eternals inspired religions and mythological characters all around the world. So it's pretty cool that they look like they would. They're a very interesting assemblage of casting. So in just that basic representation kind of realism.
And white fanboys are mad.
Probably.
Are they? I don't even pay attention anymore.
Which is my favorite vitamin. Like
white tears.
White fanboys is like my favorite thing to wake up to. Like, what are you mad about today? Like, you want to be oppressed so badly that now having a black guy and an Asian woman in the Eternals, there's no way. I'm like, you mean the first people in civilization were black, but okay, yeah, first people in the world were black, but they shouldn't exist as an Eternal. Okay, they're good, Chad McChatterson.
No one even knows the Eternals enough to get that mad about it. I'd
say,
but I'm sure they're mad.
Representation erases.
So maybe it's the my quality filter is much higher on Twitter that I'm not seeing that discourse. It's funny that the discourse I did see when the trailer came out was actually about how the trailer looks a little colonial with the big ship kind of coming ashore and the native population.
Take us over.
That scene reminded me of what was it called? The Arrival, I think. It's a very cold scene, and not cold as in lifeless, but cold as in the filter. And it felt. I mean, I have a fairly large television, and it felt kind of menacing.
Yeah.
A little bit when it came through. I was like, and the sounds rumbling. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This kind of feels a little bit different than the rest of the stuff.
Well, hopefully there is that, because I want to say the thing I'm most worried about with Eternals, and the reason I don't have I'm not drawn to them particularly. I still haven't heard any of you guys mention a favorite Eternal. I still don't doubt. Is that because they are basically gods, new gods, and they're kind of distant and aloof from human issues. They're the most cosmic and sort of the least, on the ground Marvel-y New York in the Marvel universe. So it's in a way hard to get attached to them, and one might think they have just a bunch of godlike problems with literal celestials. That's like their best fight is when they have a problem with celestials. Much in the way some people regard, I'll just say, Asians and Asian Americans, kind of distant. Can't really get a read on them.
And you're all eternal.
We're all eternal, or celestials,
right? And they called us celestials back in the day, right?
But, I mean, just about that. I want to think that they have some internal problems. They have an evil side. Their motives are not just like godlike, blanket beneficial motives.
Yeah.
But
did any of them get snapped out? Like, that's what I really want to know. Like, was it, did we have a huge eternal population and they get snapped out? I mean, are we going to get into For me, I think this would be the perfect backdoor pilot for a Fantastic Four film.
Sure.
Because we're dealing with like the weird, wacky cosmic of it all. I think it would be great. And for me, but like one thing that was cool about the trailer, seeing an Asian woman front and center in a superhero trailer that wasn't on some Dragon Lady shit, like that was kind of astonishing. But not seeing Brian Tyree Henry, of course, because Marvel in their let's do black men wrong all the time stance. I mean, like, why can't we see more of him in there too? Like, it would be kind of cool. But I guess if it's gonna be on some like Romeo Juliet love-esque type thing that we're gonna like follow through. I mean, but there's something powerful to seeing that. There's something powerful to kind of see that the story, like the craft of even this. It's just a trailer, but you're getting a top tier director now. No disrespect to anybody else who directed Marvel's films before, but this is like a top tier art echelon director. And like, so I think how this is going to play out, you go from Joss Whedon to Chloe Zhao, like that's a leap.
Yes.
And it's no disrespect. Like I'm just saying.
You can disrespect Joss Whedon all you want.
I mean, you don't do that to his face. You know me. My Joss Whedon anti-blackness. I can't stand that guy. But I mean, there's no disrespect for him or the Russo brothers. There's no disrespect, right? But the reality is, you have this person who has told stories in such a different way coming to this property that you can actually see the signature on the trailer.
Yes.
I think that is going to be what's going to make this film doper than what we've seen before.
You don't necessarily need to call it Chloe Zhao's The Eternals. Like you don't have to do that
on the screen.
Yeah.
It's like
that's how it's supposed to work. It's
auteur. Like she is an auteur, and it's like we got to understand that what she's bringing to this will hopefully up the ante. It's kind of like when we saw all the crap DC films, and then Birds of Prey comes out, and you're like, oh, so this is what it could have been. Right? Like, this is what it could have been. And so I think the same thing we're going to do with Eternals.
I mean, I think to your point, Shawn, about like Marvel's trust in their IP being paramount is evident in the fact that, Brittany, you and I had joked after the Oscars that like they were waiting for the Oscars so they could put Academy Award winning director Chloe Zhao. But when the trailer came out, you didn't even see her name.
No,
until,
no.
Because she's so fresh.
That's true. So people probably already know. So they're like, yeah, Eternals, her thing is out. My only thing is I saw people who are like, oh, this doesn't look like a Chloe Zhao movie. Marvel already put their hands on her, their creative hands, and they locked her up and she didn't do anything. They're just slapping her name on it for blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, whoa. There's some people who I feel like I understand they're like, oh, I don't like Marvel and Kevin Feige's involvement with it, but I'm like, they don't put as much involvement as I think people do, but at the same time, it's like, they're the ones who are producing this. They're gonna have a say in what is, being put out there. They're putting their money in this, so yeah, they're gonna have a say, but I don't think it's as, like, hardcore as people like to think it is, because each movie to me looks like a different movie, feels like a different movie, feels like a different genre. And because that's what they do, they purposely put their films in. Ant-Man is heist movies, like they do that on purpose, and for people to be like, oh, they're all the same, Marvel this, I don't know, it's weird.
And by the way, they didn't know Nomadland was going to win every award in the world. No one knew that. That is still a ripple in the movie industry. That's still like a big mood. That's an
anomaly.
Yeah.
That's like white nomads, like really, like how's that interesting? But shit, that movie was interesting as hell.
It was depressing, but it was interesting.
It was definitely depressing. Real talk.
The Eternals looks great. It comes out in November of this year. Like I said, theaters only. There was no also premiering on Disney Plus premiere, right? It's the first like Marvel Disney Asian led film that's not on Disney Plus premiere, right? It feels like anytime it's like an Asian forward movie, it's like, oh, and this is, you gotta pay $30 extra on Disney Plus. But not for the Eternals, buddy. That gets the full theatrical. I'm very excited. It's going to be.
They have the virus edition where everything's covered in plastic and clear and you can't. I don't want to sit in a movie theater. All that shit is poof, like a Star Trek spore. And next thing you know, I got a hand growing out of my neck.
I'm still not sold on this. Let's all gather together vibe. Marvel. That part of that. Too soon for that one. If there's a midnight show on a Tuesday, I may go, or I may see who wants to come together. Like, let's rent this theater out for just Vax people.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's rent this out and all get together and gather.
One last point I wanted to make before we wrap. You mentioned how, Dominic, this is their first kind of like non-grounded superhero movie, right? Like, the Eternals is closer to DC style characters and that they are literal gods, right? That was always the distinction between DC and Marvel. DC were these like godlike beings who have trouble being human, and then Marvel was more street level, more grounded, more human characters. Yeah. And that's been the divide all along. But now we have like literal gods. And the button on the trailer was a very Marvel-esque scene, and then like they're all eating lunch around it. Like someone made a comment that it's very similar to the shawarma scene at the end of Avengers, right? And that's a Marvel Studios signature to do the grounded kind of like, you know, take the piss out of each other kind of thing, right? Like where Icarus is like, maybe I can lead the Avengers. Ha 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 ha! You're so funny. So like, do you feel like that? Did that feel out of character or?
Oh, no, they just had to put that into so people would be reminded of the connection to Marvel Universe for people who don't know. If you watch that and you're not like Marvel nerds like we are, you don't necessarily know what kind of movie. You don't necessarily know it's a comic book movie. It could be just like a big, interesting, like space age something or other.
Right.
So was it The Last Supper and Icarus Judas?
Was it?
I mean, there's a lot of allusions to The Last
That's
Supper in that
heavy,
scene right
man.
here. I'm just saying, there's like, there's some myth making.
I think that he's gonna go bad.
I hope so.
Yeah,
really
there we
do.
go.
Because all I know is that Marvel is like, we like what he did in this film, and I feel like villains are usually the ones that they really are like, we like this
That would
work.
be nice because
So-
Icarus is traditionally like the forward, like alpha hero member, and it would be nice to subvert that. And then maybe like
I
the
think
Black
they
Knight is like the
might.
counter to that.
I think Icarus flies too close to the sun. Anyway, sorry. That's dumb joke.
No, that's very. Maybe he literally does that.
Keep this turn on this Joseph Campbell real quick.
That would be an awesome part of a movie. he could just do
But
that.
I mean, all the names though, Circe, Icarus, all their names even are alluding to other things, right?
Right.
To,
I mean, not even illusion. Gilgamesh, is like
Gilgamesh,
one of the
it's like,
characters.
what do they call it? Like, like the mythic spread, right? Like, one central myth populates and changes over geography, right? So there's something interesting about what the Eternals have always been. I mean, like back, it's crazy. Like they were always like these cosmic oddballs, right? That were like kind of like they were like the counterpoint to the Inhumans in the Marvel universe, right? Where the Inhumans were really like political intrigue, incestuous in a lot of ways, not like sexually, but like idea-wise, and then the Eternals were always kind of like as Dominic was saying earlier, they're so aloof and above it all, but we're going to deal with Celestials, right? There's something I think that's really cool about like this mythic thread that we'll see, and I think that. But when Gaiman got them, they felt more human. You know how Gaiman writes. Gaiman's going to talk about the upper and the lower at the same time in a very integrated way. Whereas I think what Gellin is doing now is showing the flaws in immortality, showing like how that aloofness has actual real world consequences. And so hopefully they'll mix the Gaiman and the Gellin together, or they did for this particular iteration of it. But the trailer itself, I watched it maybe like 4 times in a row just to see if because me and Marvel, I got to vet Marvel like I would vet a meal, right? So I have to like have at least a few times to see if I liked it. But I'm more excited about this than any other Marvel film aside from Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
We shouldn't forget that cautionary note either, that the Inhumans wasn't that great. And the Humans were very related to, if I'm not mistaken, the Humans are kind of like the X-Men to the Eternals Avengers, kind of. And they have more interesting, like, stories because they're closer to the ground. And they just didn't do that very well because that Iron Fist guy was, like, writing it. It just didn't go off very well. So there's just a cautionary note in this. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to leave it there. I think, as everyone said, the Eternal trailer was dope. We'll put a link to it in the description. We're going to take a break. After the break, you're going to hear my interview with Lin-Manuel Miranda, where we're going to talk about In the Heights, which opens June 11th on HBO Max and in theaters everywhere. And then come back and we're going to tell you what's nerd poppin'. So my guest today on The Nerds of Color, you know him as Alvy on House, Mario on The Electric Company, and Gizmo Duck on DuckTales. On June 11th, he'll play the Parago guy in a little movie called In the Heights, dropping in theaters and on HBO Max. Please welcome to Hard NOC Life, Mr. Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Hello, Keith, longtime fan, first-time caller.
Welcome to the podcast. It's great that you're going to be on HBO Max because you're basically throwing down the streaming gauntlet. You have Hamilton on Disney Plus, Freestyle Love Supreme on Hulu, Vivo on Netflix, and now In the Heights on HBO Max. It's just like you just need a Prime Video show.
I gotta start planning my Peacock project. I've been enjoying Girls 5 Eva on Peacock.
Shout out to Renee and Sarah, right?
Oof. I shoot them. I get paid by the goose. Being genius on that show.
Really, welcome to the podcast. As you probably know from Twitter, we are huge fans, and it is an honor to have you on the show. And I'm so excited for In the Heights, because in another world, we'd be hyping the Hamilton release this year, and In the Heights would have been last year. So talk about like how the pandemic kind of like flip-flopped your whole press junket tour.
Sure. No, yeah, there is a sliding doors world in which Hamilton is coming out in theaters of October of this year, and Heights came out last summer, and they happened in a very strange order. I mean, obviously, when the world shut down, I was directing my first movie. I was directing Tick Tick Boom, and 8 days of filming and the tunnel vision that comes with directing a movie, and then suddenly, everything is shut down. And I think it wasn't till about April, that first month was just about surviving and like how to make sure your kids are safe, and how to make sure most importantly your parents, the most vulnerable folks in your community, are safe. And then in April, I think we had our first conversation with Warner's, and they basically said to us, "You're one of our easier decisions of the many decisions we have to make. This is a big summer movie. Your movie deserves to be seen on a big screen. No one's going to this theater this June. It's just not happening." And so we would like to push the release to June of next year, and we'd like to circle a date so that we have it, because now everyone is circling dates next year. And I was the lone person saying no. And John M. Chu really kind of convinced me. Kiara came around very quickly too. But John, because he'd had the Crazy Rich Asians experience, really sort of said to me like, and all of these people deserve to be movie stars, and they don't get to be movie stars if you don't have the rollout that a big screen premiere has, and you don't see this big screen movie on a big screen in the way that we were able to do for Crazy Rich Asians. Because it's not just the movie itself, which speaks for itself as a work of art, but the world getting to know Leslie Grace and Melissa Barrera and Corey Hawkins and Anthony Ramos and Dasha Polanco. Again, like that was the part that convinced me like it really needs its own space. And hopefully, knock wood, and I'm still knocking wood, because the world is the world, people get to experience it on a big screen, and feel safe doing so.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, the timing is kind of perfect because, it's coming out in a space where people are vaccinated, theaters are opening, and it is getting that big screen rollout, right? Because if this was coming out 6 months ago, you wouldn't even have the option on the big screen. And to your point, having In the Heights on the biggest screen, I mean, it's an IMAX release. That's pretty crazy, right? To see this movie in IMAX.
Crazy.
It's like you and Star Wars, right?
Right. And we both have Princess Leia's dad, Jimmy Smits.
That's right.
But I love that Nina Rosario's dad is also Princess Leia's dad. I will never stop loving that. But yeah, it's been, and I have to tell you, I'm so glad we waited, because I saw the movie in a theater for the first time this past Tuesday. And it was very special because it was my private screening, and it was the entire original Broadway cast and crew. So it's the crew of the Richard Rodgers. It was my dresser who dressed me for Usnavi. I sat between Janet and Andrea, our original salon ladies, and Chris and Veronica, who met his wife when she played Nina in the basement of the drama bookshop in 2002. So it was a really special way to see it. And I saw details I could not see on my screen at home. I spotted Nina Lafarga in 96,000. I couldn't spot her on my tablet at home. So there really is, and again, because it's a musical, I know how many countless theater productions have done this show together, how many casts will want to see this movie as a cast. You want to see musicals so that you can clap in the theater and be in that energy together. So I'm really grateful we waited.
I can't wait to see this on a big screen either. And just for what it's worth, I mentioned the Lin-Manuel universe earlier. This is also, I'm collecting the In the Heights gauntlet as well, because I've had Javier on the podcast, and I just had Randy on the podcast a couple weeks ago. So like now I have Usnavi, and it's just like
they were both at the screening on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think I saw Javier's Instagram at the end of the show. Yeah, that whole like world in which In the Heights came out last year. You know, if there wasn't a pandemic, and then right, Hamilton
the time stone, right?
Yeah, exactly, like Doctor Strange. What do you think would have been different had, you know, I mean, other than no pandemic, but like had this come out early? Because I think it would just be more poetic, right? In the Heights predates Hamilton, but now it's kind of the other way. Hamilton came out, so many more people got to see Hamilton last year than before, and now In the Heights follows that. Like, talk about that, just kind of like
I think but the most interesting thing about that what if scenario, Marvel Comics number whatever this is how In the Heights would have landed in that election year. Mm-hmm. That to me was the most compelling reason for keeping it where it was in an administration where we survived more demonization as a Latino community than any other previous administration. I mean, the guy in his campaign speech was calling Mexicans rapists and murderers, and they're not sending over their best people. At the end of 4 years of that, to have this giant, big budget reminder of our humanity and our place in this country and our, you know, the fact that we are people, full stop, not political pawns or demonized the other that are surging over some imaginary border. I you know, thank God the election turned out the way it did. But I also like, I think it's actually never a bad time to remind the world of our humanity.
Sure.
And you know, we are 25% of the movie-going audience. We are the fastest growing population in the United States. The census numbers are coming in. They're going to bear that out. But that's the biggest what if, like in terms of how, because we have an undocumented character in our movie, and Kiara's decision to
flesh out.
To foreground that and flesh it out and give it to the character that I think is the most New Yorker of anyone here, who loves New York the most and who only wants to invest in their community. You're telling me that kid doesn't belong here? Like, again, it just puts a human face on it in a discourse that has otherized and demonized us so much. So that's the biggest what if for me.
Speaking of the former guy, right, you had to change some of the lyrics in the song for the adaptation in 96,000. But the thing you didn't have to change, speaking of Sonny, was his verse. And his verse is as relevant in 2021 as it was 15 years ago. So talk about, like, you know, some of the changes that you had to make to the song to make it less, you know, let's just say referential to a certain guy. But then also like Sonny's verse talking about gentrification and racism being blatant and everything.
The Trump lyric, people had already been changing. Like local productions, as far back as 2015, 2016, were saying, can we not? They would literally come to the licensing agency and say, can we change this to something else? And we would say yes. And so we just sort of ratified what the culture was doing to that. Because when I wrote it in 2005, he was a reality TV host.
Right.
You know, it was Jeff Probst. It was Regis Philbin. It was he was a cartoon monopoly man. I think my parents owned a Trump board game in the 80s.
I mean, to be fair, he's still a cartoon monopoly man 4 years later.
Yeah, but now he's a cartoon monopoly man that is like sort of has to own some of the most shameful and horrible like chapters in our history.
Yeah, he's like more Dr. Doom than Monopoly Man now, I guess.
Yeah, it really took a turn. And so you know, time changed that lyric more than I did. And then, you know, with again, you're referencing Sonny's verse, which was, what about immigration? Politicians be hating. Racism in this nation's gone from latent to blatant. And again, when I wrote that lyric, I was thinking of Pat Buchanan, who was test ballooning, demonizing immigrants in his presidential run. I was thinking of the governor of Arizona, Jan Brewer, who introduced a draconian policy of making people carry around their immigration papers on them at all time. In fact, when we went to Arizona, and I played it in the tour in Arizona, we changed the lyric to Arizona be hating. And the audience that came to see our show cheered, and two little old white ladies would walk out like every night on that line. So it's sad that lyric has gotten more relevant. But again, like it's, I just, Yeah, I mean that's the nature of musicals too, is that like time will make fools. I'm still like hanging on to the fact that they reference a calling card.
Yeah, you didn't leave that out. Right?
I'm like, as long as I see him on Sail in a Bodega, it stays in the show. The 9 Train was like a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think Nina would have even, that wasn't even a thing when she was a kid in this version of the movie, right?
100%.
Yeah. So no, yeah. Well, speaking of things you had to change, right? Because a lot had to be taken out for the movie because it's hard to adapt a stage musical to screen, and things had to get cut. What was the hardest thing for you to get rid of when it came to making the movie?
Well, the great news, none of it was hard because Chiara did all the hard work. When we started writing this together, I wrote on this for 3 years before Chiara came aboard, and Chiara, and she'll be the first to admit it, was like, I was playing catch up in terms of us starting to write this from scratch with the characters that you created, and we really found our focus, and we found how we were going to tell these stories and which stories to tell when Chiara came on board in 2004. I think for the movie version, it represented an opportunity for Chiara to take the lead in a real way for the first time. And she made the brave decisions. She sat in the other room while I read through the first scene and was like, well, Camila's not in the open.
You said it, I didn't.
But again, when I think about Camila now and I watch the movie, which I'm so proud of, I actually think of Cabaret. I think Cabaret is actually the best movie adaptation of a musical. I don't think anyone would say that movie isn't great on its own terms, but where's Fräulein Schneider? Where's Herr Schultz? And when I go see that show on stage, I get to see them again, and I get to hear their wonderful songs and their doomed romance. And when we see In the Heights again, like, here comes Camila, and she's going to represent, and she's going to kick ass, and that's not going anywhere. So again, like, it's okay that people mourn and people yell at me on Twitter. It's kind of like, it's okay. I have had more time to mourn than you.
Yeah.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that the day we filmed Breathe, I had a burst of inspiration, and I called Priscilla Lopez and was like, send me a headshot, send me a picture of you. And I snuck a picture of her into the frame onto the set. So Camila is still canonically Priscilla Lopez, and you can see her picture in their apartment in Breathe.
Oh, and I love the nods to the original cast. So of course, Olga reprises her role as Abuela. Like, I don't think anyone else can play that. I think if it ever goes on, she just has to go to every spot in the country and just play it because she's so great. There's a couple of cameos. I have to say, I have a little beef with Warner Bros. Ruined in the trailer. I don't know. Can we say that Chris is in it?
Chris Jackson? Yeah.
Because when I saw him, I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. And then he's in the trailer. So
again, like, there are many schools of thought on what to do in trailers, right? There is the school of, I agree with the policy of every new trailer should reveal a little something new and whet your appetite a little more. It had been a long time since the last trailer when we released that. So I felt okay with being like, all right, let's give him Chris Jackson. The folks who were paying attention and saw the paparazzi pictures of us already knew.
True.
But that being said, like, that was a nice reveal. It gave it a little extra sort of boost on the day that Chris and I keep exploring our relationship in what I hope are not increasingly antagonistic ways.
Well, for folks to know, like, I'll just say one thing, and you should just stick through the credits. That's all I'll say.
Yeah,
because people may not know that.
Samuel L. Jackson may or may not show up and ask.
I mean, Usnavi, would you like to join? I need to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative, Usnavi. That would be pretty cool. Speaking of Usnavi, I did want to ask, what was it like for you to see your son take on the role? Were you like, look at my son? I mean, first of all, he played the role at the Kennedy Center a couple years, even before he was cast for the movie.
Yeah, that's when I first saw him in the role. He actually auditioned for the tour in 2011 when he was a kid.
I was going to say, he was like, for Usnavi or for Sonny? Because okay.
And I have no memory of it. I don't
12,
remember
right?
seeing him because he was a child. And my first memory of meeting him was his Hamilton audition, where he came in, sang my shot like he was Alexander Hamilton reincarnated, like the hungriest motherfucker I've ever seen in my life. And just like his heart beating outside of his chest. And and what has been amazing has been watching that kid grow. Like in Hamilton, he was genius and he was brilliant. He was the knucklehead. Like he was like the kid who was geeked to be there among the cast, and watching his maturity grow within that company. And then seeing him at the Kennedy Center was a revelation for me. It was like, oh, he doesn't have to put anything on to play this part. Like he just is Usnavi. I wrote a Twitter thread about it that I cry when I think about it. I felt like I built this thing 10 years ago and it fits this kid better than it ever fit me. Because, I think spiritually I'm more of a Nina than an Usnavi. It's not an accident I started writing this thing when I was at school, and I was one of 2 Latino theater majors at the school. So again, it was a revelation to see that the answer was so close to home in my life that I was like, oh, Anthony was the perfect Usnavi all along. And
were you already casting when he was playing that, or was it already kind of?
We were still not quite there yet. We were starting to, and John was casting a really wide net. Like he was he was going for the Crazy Rich Asians alchemy of, there's Michelle, who we all have a screen relationship with, and there's like Ken, and then here's like some stars you've never met before, but they're movie stars. Here's Henry Golding, here's Gemma Chan, and here's
Snake Eyes, and now the next Marvel superhero, right? Yeah, which Anthony's in the Transformers now. Like,
I know.
How cool is that?
So that's what's most exciting to me, is that like we're hopefully creating a lane for these young stars, and 5 years from now the hope is that people go, what was the big deal about In the Heights? And that would be because there's like Latino movies coming out every month now. I would love for that to be the case. I would love for people to be sick of our stories. Right now they're so hungry that there's no way that In the Heights can represent it all.
Right.
But again, that's the goal, is to create a lane for more stories to be told.
Yeah, the only oneism is what we're trying to get rid of, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Lin. It has been such a pleasure. I'm so honored to talk to you in person, kind of. And,
beyond the DMs.
All right, that was me and Lin-Manuel Miranda. I can't believe I'm actually even saying that. Like, that was my conversation with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So we're going to go from that to what's nerd poppin'. Let's start with Shawn, our returning champion. What's nerd poppin'?
Wow, there's so much really good stuff out. But I think what's been really, there is a book called Homesick Pilots, or it's an Image book. That's been really good. Image is inspiring. Image and Boom are just killing the comics game, and so is Vault. I never bought a horror comic really before, but I've been buying almost every horror comic that Vault puts out. And I think Ram V is killing the comics game. The Many Deaths of Layla Starr is probably the single best first issue I've read in probably a decade.
Nice. Brittany, what's nerd poppin'?
I haven't started it, but I just ordered 3 DC comic books, which I ordered Naomi season 1. I ordered, a Black Canary. It looks like more, I don't know if it's an actual series put into a hardbound book, or if it's like how they've been doing youth or young adult novels with like actual comic book characters. I'm not sure if it's like that type of deal. And then I got like a new Nubia run that they've done. With cool. DC, so I ordered those 3, and I'm very excited to dive into those and read those. So that's my nerd poppin' thing.
Their YA digest are the little digest size books, whatever, they're incredible.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure if that's what the Black Canary one is or not, but I posted pictures on my Instagram and Twitter, so it's like anyone else has to read them.
Speaking of Naomi, shout out to David Walker. He's got Naomi coming out on CW this fall, and then Better Root.
Yes, and Regina King's going to be the director, which I'm excited about, because her Watchmen stuff was just, she's just dope. She's just such a dope person.
Dominic, what's nerd poppin'?
I'll abscond. Keith, what's nerd popping?
Dominic is like, nothing is nerd popping.
Yeah, I'm being an asshole.
He's like, Dom's like, me?
We can skip one. I don't need to hear what I think. Keith, what's nerd popping with you?
So, no, I just wanted to shout out Howard University naming their College of Arts after Chadwick Boseman.
Oh, yeah.
That was a really emotional thing to have happen. He's probably their most famous alum. And
oh wait, speaking of Chadwick, even though it's not Black it's Black Panther related. There's an announcement about the Wakanda series on Disney Plus.
Okoye is going to be the...
Denai? Is that how you say her name?
Denai Guerrero is going to lead it, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we shouldn't miss that since that's...
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and you couldn't have, like, a show about Wakanda and not, like, feature Okoye. Mm-hmm. So... And she's a huge star in and of her. Like, she should have had her own Michonne series for years. So
that is nerd popping. Cool.
That is nerd popping. That is also Hard NOC Life for this week, this Memorial Day holiday. Hope everyone's had a safe weekend. We'll catch you on the flip side. Until then, Dominic, how can people get in touch with you on the internet?
Oh, I'm at Doma, DOMMAH on Twitter or Instagram.
Britney, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hi Britney Monet. My other podcast, the Black Lightning podcast, we just did a live episode talking about the series finale of Black Lightning. It was fun. Clement fell out of his chair live. It was amazing. Lamont Guy, who's one of the writers for Black Lightning, was there and saw it happen. So that was great. You can check that out. And we're on Twitter at BL_podcast. But it's not the last you've heard of that crew, the Lituation Room. So we're coming back with our own separate podcast where we are talking about all things Black culture.
Cool. I was going to ask what happens to the BL podcast since the show's over, and there's no Painkiller.
There's other things coming that I don't know if I can say, but I mean, you heard me mention a certain comic that I picked up, so
breadcrumbs.
I mean, people are gonna figure it out so easy. I thought people were gonna figure it out as soon as I posted a picture of this comic, so I was like, they're gonna know. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in the next couple of months.
Awesome. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow. Follow Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color.
You see how Keith just dissed me? You let me out.
You can. How do we get?
You can find me, Shawn Taylor, at Real Love.
I'm sorry. It's been so long.
Shawn Taylor at Real Love Punk. I suck at social media, but I'm usually everyone poking about. And my podcast, Surviving Creativity, Season 2, will launch in a couple of weeks. The last and final season. We've been doing pretty well on that podcast. And look forward to a book dropping the last quarter of this year, which I can't give too much about it, but maybe next time I'm on here I can talk about it.
My bad.
He's not a monk. He's got an internet presence. Okay, Keith.
My bad. It's been so long. I'm just so used to Dom, Brittany, Keith. And then, all right. You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow. And follow Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color. And go to hardknockmedia.com to find us and all the podcasts in the Hard NOC family. Give us a rating and a review at Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you get podcasts. And then subscribe to our videos at youtube.com/Nerds of Color. You can follow us on Twitch. Jamal Michelle, who used to be on this podcast, he's graduated on to live streaming on Twitch, where he's gaming Pokemon Snap right now and doing interviews with other gamers while playing fighting games on a new show called Fighting Words with Jamal. So we are all over the place. Follow us on all social media platforms. Anyway, that's it for this week. Until next time.
I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.